Well, hello everybody, welcome back to the channel. And today what I thought I would do is I would investigate a question that I've been thinking about for a while, and that is, do you actually need a modern car in your life? And a lot of that depends on what you define as modern. And I'm going to thank my Instagram followers for this, because a couple of weeks ago I put a poll on my Instagram story. Follow it, THC Motoring, if you don't already. That'd be super lovely of you. And I asked, are there any classics that you would recommend as daily drivers for 2025? And you've just straight away there seen a pretty old Toyota go past. That was an Avensis, I think. So it looks like the answer's written in the stars. I think you can rely on older cars for dailies, and you don't need to rely on ultra modern cars. I'm driving my Honda Jazz, which is nearly 17 years old. This is my regular daily car. But would you classify this as a modern car? And I was thinking about this, and I don't think the Honda Jazz, or this second generation of Honda Jazz, is your typical modern car anymore. And the reason why I think that is because so many modern cars now, if not all of them, are so laden with technology. It's everywhere on them. Literally everything has got sensors on them, so-called safety features that I don't think necessarily make you any safer. Things like lane assist or automatic brakes, because they make cars unpredictable, or they give cars too much responsibility and they take the responsibility away from the driver. So in this video we're going to investigate, first of all, this Honda Jazz that I've owned for 3 years and driven, how many miles have I done in this now? I think nearly 30,000 miles I've done in this car. But also investigate even older alternatives, because me and lots of my Instagram followers and friends of mine do believe that you can rely on an older car and it won't actually be a financially ruinous decision. If anything, it could actually be a financially sensible decision. So that's what we're going to talk about today. I'd love to know your opinions on this in the video, so comment please, because the more opinions that we have on this, the better. Apologies for the wind noise, but hopefully this new microphone that I'm trying out is going to block most of that out. So this is my Honda Jazz that you've probably all seen before, regular viewers for the channel. It's a 58 reg 1.4 petrol. It's not the fastest car in the world, it's not the best looking, it's not the best to drive, and it certainly isn't the most interesting. But it makes very good sense as a modern car, or a regular runabout I should say. Inside, it's plenty of space, it's comfortable, it's relatively refined for a small car. You've got loads and loads of cubby holes, as you can see there. One there, glove box there, plenty of storage space inside the doors. There's plenty of space in the back. These seats do fold completely flat as well, so there's no small car of this size, I don't think, that can fit more stuff in than this can. And you've got a decent boot size as well. But this isn't really a car that you love, the Jazz. It's a car that you respect. And that's why I want to sort of move on from this in a few months' time and rely on older cars daily. And I'm going to talk about that now, about what cars both me, from my experience of talking to other owners and what I've been thinking about, and also Instagram followers and friends of mine recommend for retro daily drivers that aren't going to break the bank and will serve you well, and you won't have to make any compromises over. So the first car I thought I'd talk about is the Morris Minor. That's the oldest car that was mentioned on Instagram as a good daily driver. I've driven several Morris Minors before, and I know several people who do or have daily driven them in the past. And they do make good sense as a classic daily driver, I think. It depends obviously what car that you're after, but if you want something that's just ultra simple, not got much in the way of creature comforts, it's just got things like a heater, and it's not got a all synchro mesh gearbox, which means you can't change into first gear when on the move, for example. There are tricks around that, double declutching or changing it straight from second and then into first. But they do make a lot of sense because they're very simple. Pretty much any job on the Morris Minor you can do on your own driveway. Adjust that camera angle a little bit there for you. Compared to 70s cars, British 70s cars to be exact, they were made with much thicker and better quality steel than lots of British Leyland cars in the 70s were made from. So that means that they can live outside even more happily than many other British cars can. And because so many of them were made and so many have survived, getting parts for them is really, really easy. You can buy, bolt-on wings. The engine is the A series that I've got in my Austin Allegro, and loads of other cars had that fitted, and they're a very tough, dependable engine. So yeah, provided that you don't do a lot of motorway driving, I don't recommend the Morris Minor for that because they aren't very fast, as you can imagine. They can do motorway speeds no problem, but they are quite noisy. And there are drum brakes all the way around, so you have got to get used to the drum brakes. You've got to anticipate a lot more stopping distances, but that makes you a safer driver. And there's always the option of doing a disc brake conversion to usually an MG Midget disc brake conversion, and that's an easy job to do. Even me, I could do that probably. And if you want something a bit more distinctive than the Morris Minor as a daily driver small car, something like a Standard 8 or a Standard 10 I think would also be really good. Again, there's a really good owners club for that. There's the Austin A30 and A35, similar mechanics to a Morris Minor. So all of those would be worth considering as well. And I can speak from experience about the next car I'm going to talk about, the Austin Allegro, because as regular channel viewers will know, I've got one. And that is one of the easiest things, not just cars, but things, full stop, I've ever owned. It's not needed too much. It's needed, obviously, jobs to be done to it to keep it on the road, but it's not been jobs that have been too complicated to sort out. And anything minor that needs doing, like for example, it needs a couple of new hoses at the moment, all I'm waiting for is just the club to send me the parts, and it'll just be a quick swap over job. Very, very little tools needed at all. So that's why they're good. And again, because they've got A-series transmission on the smaller Allegros, the smaller engine ones, there's plenty of parts available for those. And the hydrogas suspension on those, they're very well catered for as well. One thing I would say though is that compared to Morris Minors, trim parts, interior parts, body panels are a lot harder to find. So that's the proviso on one of those. Several Fords were also mentioned on Instagram, specifically the Mark III and the Mark IV Ford Fiesta. So the 90s and the 2000s ones. Fords don't really do it for me. I'm not really a Ford person, but you still see quite a few of those around. And that on its own should indicate that they're still more than capable of being used as daily drivers, particularly the Mark IVs. You see plenty of those around. I wouldn't say the Mark IV is the most interesting car in the world, but they did drive quite well, because that's always what Ford's have been about, a good driving experience. And the Mark III obviously is the late 80s, early 90s ones. And the Mark IV works well as well, as I've said. And also you can consider the Mark V Fiesta, because that came out in, I think it was 2002. And again, not the most interesting car in the world, but you see even more of those around, and they've been recommended as easy things to look after and very simple. And there is the ST version as well, the 150. Someone mentioned one of those, and I can imagine that that's a very fun car if you like that sort of thing. Quite a few Rovers were mentioned as well. One thing I've been considering buying for a while now is the Rover 100, which is the last of the Metros. And the reason why I'd consider that over a Metro badged version, the Rover Metro one, is it's a fully injected engine. And that just means it's that bit easier for day-to-day running, because the Rover Metro, that also had a carb engine. Now, plenty of people use those regularly. I'm not saying that you can't. But if you want just a bit more simplistic and a little bit more easier to live with day to day, i.e. not needing a choke, for example, then the Rover 100 is a very good thing to consider. I spoke to loads of owners this year about that, and there's loads of people that daily drive those still. Most parts are easy to find. It's got the K-Series in it, which was fitted to a lot of cars, as you know. Most Rovers had it fitted to the Land Rover Freelander Mark 1 and also the Lotus Elise. So yeah, they definitely did fit very well in terms of having a simple car to have on your fleet. Easy to work on, very simple, but refined and comfortable. The hydrogas setup on that was modernised from the 80s, and that was really, really good. You've got to watch rust on them. I mean, I'm not going to go on about rust too much, because the main thing you've got to watch with any old car is rust, regardless of how old it is. Because every car's old if you're looking for a retro car, obviously. I'm garbling a bit here, but you get the point that I'm making. And I can also speak from personal experience about the benefits of running a Rover R8 as a daily driver, the 200-400 series from 1989 to 1995, because I've got one, as you know. It's a lovely 214 SI. That is needing a head gasket repair, because that is a weak point on those cars. But compared to later Rovers, the head gasket isn't as frequent a problem on those, because they were built better than later Rovers were. And those R8s are Hondas underneath, so they were built very, very well. So they can be relied on very easily. And I've done over 3,000 miles in mine this year, and I would have done even more had the head gasket not shown problems. But the car hasn't let me down. It's showing signs of failure, and it's been diagnosed by a mechanic, but it's not left me stranded on the side of the road. As long as you know what to watch out for, temperature and all that, then they're fine. And the cars that came after it, the R3 200, the HHR 400, and also the 25 and the 45, they're all decent cars as well. They aren't built as well as the earlier 90s Rovers, but there's plenty of people that still use those as daily cars. If you go on to Discount MG Rover Spares, there's loads and loads of specialist, loads and loads of parts you can get on there. Good quality parts as well. There's a huge Rover following. I'll go around the block again just to leave that Fabia behind. There's a huge Rover enthusiast following these days, so there's loads of people you can talk to. And I've driven several examples of those cars, and they're comfortable, you can use them every day, they're practical, and yeah, they make good sense. The Rover 600 as well, and the Rover 75. If you want something a bit bigger and a bit more refined, if that's the car you're in the market for, then they're two good options. If I had to choose between the two, based on what I know about them, and feel free to disagree if you do, I think the 600 is a better option, because it was better built than the 75. They tend to have less expensive faults on them than 75s do, because Rover 75 suspension is a weak point, and when that goes wrong, you can be into big bills with that. So it is worth bearing that in mind with the 75. The 75 is a better looking car than the 600, and it's still, really refined, just like the 600 is. I've never driven one on the motorway, but they do eat up motorway journeys. Those that regularly drive them tell me. And they're still dirt cheap as well. Everything I've mentioned so far is really cheap, really reasonably priced. You get a lot of car, particularly in the case of a 600, you get a lot of car for your money. And back to my R8, I only paid 1,500 quid for that, and yet I prefer taking that on longer journeys than I do the Jazz, because it's just more refined and more comfortable. And there is also the Rover Streetwise. Matt from Stickman TV, he has a Rover Streetwise as his daily driver. Has had it for a long time, called Hope, and that serves him really well. It's one of the only facelifted Rovers that I'd have, because quality of those did go downhill a little bit, but the Streetwise does have a little bit of a unique style, with the fact it's got the plastic bumpers, the urban on-road style. And I think compared to other facelifted Rovers, I'm not a fan of them, like I've said, but the Streetwise does actually look quite good. It suits the facelift appearance better than the 25, 45 and 75 did. And of course, you can also think about the AMG versions, the ZR, the ZS and the ZT, if you want a bit more spice in your life and that bit more driving pleasure. If you want comfort, the Rovers are definitely ones to go for, whereas the Z cars, they definitely are the ones you want to have if you want to have a really, really fun handling driving experience. You do sacrifice ride quality to get that, but I've driven the ZR and the ZS and they are very fun things. Something else that's come to my attention is old Skodas, particularly the Skoda Favorit and the Skoda Felicia. They were the early 90s little Skodas, the older equivalent of the Fabia, really. And a friend of mine, Dan, he's daily driven both of those cars. He regularly uses the Felicia still. He hasn't got the Favorit anymore, but that passed on to somebody that does daily drive it. And he's been using that for months as his daily car. Doesn't have a modern car in his fleet now because the Felicia just did it so well. And because they're Skodas, they're built really well, because the 90s was that time that Skoda really were starting to make themselves known as a serious car manufacturer. And again, as long as you watch things like rust on them, it seems like parts are quite easy to get. Would love to have some Skoda Favorit / Felicia experts on here to let me know, because I would like to know more about those cars, because I don't know, you don't see them very often, so they have got that retro uniqueness about them, and yet they make a lot of sense. And talking of Skodas, we've caught up with this Fabia again. I mean, this is actually quite fortunate, because this Dan's Felicia estate is basically the 90s equivalent of this Fabia estate that we have in front of us. And if you do want to go for the earlier Fabia, the 2000 Skoda, and I have considered buying one a couple of times in the past, then they're really good. They're reliable. They don't have the retro appeal that the Favorit and the Felicia do, and that's probably what I'd choose if I was getting one of those. But yeah, an old Skoda would definitely make a lot of sense as a daily. And something else that's been mentioned, and something which I'm seriously considering, is a Volvo from the 80s and 90s. And the one I'm particularly interested in is the Volvo 240. I was speaking to a few 240 owners last week. Both of them, or at least one of them, is used as a daily driver. And they're capable of Starship Enterprise mileage, the 240s. Again, check rust, all that stuff. But what really appeals about the 240 is it was a car they made for 20 years. And the design is even older than that, because the 144 that came before it is basically an older 240. The basic design's the same, but they put more modern equipment on the 240. They had an electronically injected engine from the late 80s, and that's the one that's recommended if you want to daily one of them. And in estate form, they're hugely practical. And I had a little drive of one when I was speaking to the two owners the other day. And to drive, it was really smooth. Gear change was lovely, the clutch was really smooth, the seat is excellent, steering was light because it's got power steering, visibility is excellent, despite the fact it was seen as a big car back in the day, but now it's not a big car at all when you look at how big modern cars are. and it's just got basic essentials with the added bonus of heated seats, so that bit more comfortable feature for winter days. And because they're a 70s design, they're incredibly simple. I looked under the bonnet and it was just like looking at the engine bay of the Allegro. Just so simple. Easy to get parts for, the following's really good. And the people that drive those Volvos, they absolutely swear by them. And it's not just the 240 that you can mention. There's also the 740 that came out in the mid-80s. And then there was the 940 that came out in 1990 that replaced the 740. Both of those are really good cars. Even more space in them than the 240. They are slightly more complicated, but compared to a modern car, very simple still. And they probably are. I don't really know much about these Volvos because I've not talked about them compared to 240s. I've not spoken to many enthusiasts about those. But I can imagine they are a bit more refined than 240s because they are a more modern car. A bit better on motorways, but 240s can do that, no problem at all. And the value of 240s is creeping up. They are, fetching, pretty decent money now. The 740s and the 940s, they are just about still very cheap. But that probably won't be the case for much longer because a lot of people are seeing the benefit of having these as modern cars. So certainly an old Volvo is worth considering. There is the 850 that came out afterwards. People say that's the first modern Volvo. And yeah, they are good. I still see a few of those around quite a bit. But they do rust a bit worse than the other Volvos from what I've been told. One Ford I did forget to mention, and probably the one I'd be most likely to buy if it was me, is the Mark 1 Ford Focus. That was a revelation when that came out in the late 90s. I think it was 98 when that first came out, or 99. And still looks good even today, because it was much more better looking than the Escort that came before it. And again, I've not driven one, but I know plenty of people who have, and they are unbelievably fun cars to drive. Fully independent rear suspension, great handling. And again, there's still plenty of those that are around. So if you're someone who is fine to go with the crowd because it's still quite a common car, but wants something that is retro, is cool, is dependable, is simple, and something that in the future is probably going to seriously appreciate in value, then the Ford Focus Mark 1 is definitely one worth considering. Someone else also mentioned the Mark III Vauxhall Cavalier, and I actually see one of those being driven every day on the way to work. And I've always liked the Cavalier, a lot more than the Vectra. I don't know why, but I just think the Cavalier just, I think, suited the 90s era more than the Vectra did. I don't know much about Vectras, and I'm not a great expert on Cavaliers either, but they're starting to appreciate in values now, Cavaliers. I mean, the SRIs obviously are... Oh, look at that. Rally car coming the other way. But yeah, the SRI Cavaliers, the sporty ones, would obviously fetch a premium, but your standard Cavalier, they're probably worth about the same, maybe a bit less, but not too far off from your standard Volvo 240s. Probably the saloon 240s, because the estate versions carry more of a premium, like any old Volvo, really. But yeah, Cavalier was recommended as well. Jaguar XJS was also mentioned. I suppose with an XJS, you've got to buy wisely with those because in the day they didn't have the best reputation for reliability, and they are a very luxurious car. So again, they will be a lovely thing to live with in terms of how comfortable they are and the premium that an XJS does command in terms of the image of it and how good it looks. They do look really good, XJSs. But I imagine that you would have to have quite deep pockets because they are very expensive things to run. And because they are a luxurious car, there is a lot of things on them that you have to keep an eye on. I think electrics mainly are what can really sting on XJS if they let you down. But there's evidence that they can obviously be a good daily car, definitely. A Renault 19 was also mentioned, but that's something I don't really know anything about at all. So if anybody knows anything about Renault 19s and can add those in the comments, then that would be much appreciated. Peugeot 106 was mentioned as well. You still see those around quite a bit. Simple car, easy to maintain, good to drive as well. And there's also the Nissan Micra K11, which I think is probably the best small car of the 1990s, because you see more of those around than any other car from that era in terms of small cars. They're unique to look at. There's no car that looks like a K11 Micra, not really anyway. Very simple, very reliable. Almost like a 90s Morris Minor, really, I would say, the K11 Micra. The Toyota Corolla was also mentioned as a good older car to use regularly. I don't really know much about Corollas, and the actual Corolla wasn't specified on Instagram because there's so many of them that were made. But I can't think of any safer old buys to make in terms of a car that is going to be dependable, as long as you do your research properly and check it over thoroughly and all that. Oh, phone's shaking a bit, my apologies. Yeah, this microphone mount means it can't go into the can't fit properly into the phone mount properly. I hope that's not been shaking too much while you guys have been watching this. And finally, a couple of VWs were mentioned as well. Some of the Polos were mentioned. Polos in the 90s and late 80s. You see some of those around occasionally. Again, simple cars, well built because they're VWs. You can also say the same about Golfs as well. The Mark II Golf wasn't actually mentioned on Instagram, but they're really good cars. They've got the retro look about them, simplicity. I've had friends who've owned those, and still fairly cheap as well. Mark 1s start to command a premium now, but Mark 2s are still fairly cheap. And you've also got the Mark 3 and the Mark 4 Golf, 90s and 2000s ones, and they're good cars. People are a bit rude about them sometimes because they didn't seem as desirable as the earlier Golfs, but they are still good cars. I mean, Mark 4s especially, you see plenty of those around still. They stopped making those, I think, in 2004, I think. And you see plenty of those around, so it shows that they can be looked after very, very easily. And yeah, that's all the cars that were mentioned on Instagram by my Instagram followers. And I'm by basically saying, so why am I thinking about old cars to use regularly rather than just modern cars? Because surely, as you've been watching this, you've seen every car pretty much that we've gone past as a modern car. Well, when modern cars go wrong, the repairs are often enormous. Someone who I work with has had a Kia Sportage now for several years, and she's taken that to a garage because it needs the gearbox and the clutch replacing, and she's been given the bill of £4,000 for that. You could have a full proper respray and almost bodywork rebuild on a classic car for that much, depending on how much welding's needed. And a friend of mine, another friend who I work with, had a Citroen Picasso, less than 10 years old, I think, a people carrier. And it had all sorts of bells and whistles on it, stop, start, whatever. And it wouldn't start one day. It wouldn't get him away from work. So he was rescued by the AA. It was taken to his local garage, who'd actually MOT'd and serviced it the previous day. And they looked into it and they basically said, sorry, we can't diagnose it. So you can either have a new engine in it or we'll scrap the car and give you the value of it. And that's what happened. It was scrapped. Whereas if that was a older car, you'd have a lot less diagnosing to do because everything is covered in sensors so much now that it just makes cars absolute pigs to work on. And it means that repairs are not financially viable. So you just scrap the car and then have to release even more of a carbon footprint by buying a new one. Because people talk about old cars, oh, they're polluting, oh, this, that, and the other, oh, you're killing the planet by having an old car, But it's not true. Because if you're keeping an old car going instead of scrapping it and then buying a new one, it's more ecologically friendly. And because these older cars aren't ridiculously over-engineered like cars are now, repairs are going to be more cost effective, and you can do them yourself. You can still learn valuable mechanical skills. If you don't want to do it yourself, there'll be plenty of garages out there that will be able to fix them, because it's old-fashioned mechanical parts. And I bet there's loads of garages now. And actually, I don't bet, I know this, because I was speaking to an MOT tester the other day, and he says that there's so many modern cars now that many garages just won't touch, because they're just so tricky to work on because of all the sensors and extra stuff they have on them. It's just unnecessary. And you don't have to make compromises by having an older car. As you know, I've been using my Rover R8 as a daily all year, more or less. And it's still got the original radio in it, which still works, but you can have a Bluetooth adapter that you can plug into it. You can have a cassette adapter that you can put in the radio, and that can then Bluetooth music from your phone on there. Just a little thing you can buy off Amazon for about 20 quid. And most of them are not unrefined. You know, I'd happily drive my R8 all the way up to Scotland, because it would just look after you. It wouldn't throw you around at all. Yes, there might be more expensive fuel bills, and yes, there is the tax to bear in mind, because these 90s cars aren't tax exempt yet, and some of them in the 80s aren't either. So yeah, the tax rates can be a bit frustrating, but the alternative is, if you think about people that get modern cars on leases now, think about the size of a deposit that a lot of people have to put down, and then the monthly payments that go on. I've had to spend quite a bit on my Rover R8 this year, but I bet next year, and I'll make sure I document this for you guys, next year will be a lot less, because it's had a lot of work done to it this year. Huge amounts of, fairly big amounts of engine work that are going to be done. But it will still be more cost effective than doing a similar job on a modern car. I genuinely believe that. So that's why they really make good sense for me. And you can take them to a nice retro car meet, and you can meet new friends. The amount of friends I've made in my car hobby is brilliant. And I've not been famous for making friends in my life, but yet having this hobby has really helped me do that. So it's not just a question of buying an old car that you can just get out on weekends. You know, use them, enjoy them, because it's not scary using an old car. As long as you've done all your checks that you should do on one, you budgeted appropriately for it, you will find them a better alternative than many modern cars. That's my opinion. I'm not saying that this is gospel, what I'm talking about here, but I do generally think that if you want a bit more simplicity in your life and technology not taking over like it is these days, get yourself a retro car. Meet new people. You know, save the planet. You know, don't keep throwing things away. Make do and mend. Don't just be someone that wants to keep up with the neighbours and have as modern cars as you can think of. You know, enjoy it. Enjoy being simpler, because it's a simpler time. You know, 80s, 90s, and the other eras I've talked about, they were a simpler time. You know, everyone's lives weren't on show all the time. Yeah, that's what I'd recommend. So let me know what you think about this. Well done for watching it all the way to the end. I just think it was an interesting topic to discuss with you. So thank you again for watching. Please like, comment and subscribe. Please consider becoming a channel member to help this channel grow. And I'm going to use this video myself, because I'm probably going to be getting a retro daily driver next year alongside the Rover. And it will probably be one of the cars that I mentioned in this video, but you have to wait and see. So see you guys very soon. Look after yourselves. Bye bye.